Hi there, it's great to see you, and yeah, great to have you with me here in the Holy Shed once again, the weeniest parish in the world. And gosh, look, this is week 46. Do you realize that? Week 46 in the shed. Who'd have thought that all this stuff was going to go on this long? But hey, we count our blessings, don't we? We have this lovely space, this TARDIS at the bottom of the garden to gather in. And, there was quite a lot of snow earlier on, actually. I mean, I woke up and saw a sprinkling of snow across the garden this morning, but just half an hour ago or so, I looked out and it was like a blizzard going on up there. I think it's stopped now, which is just as well. Well, I don't know about you. I don't know what you've been doing this weekend, but I've had an amazing time. Pretty full on, but an amazing time. I've been leading an Enneagram workshop for the wonderful Sarum College in Salisbury. 20 odd people. Well, I don't mean odd people, they were very nice people actually, but 20 something people, 27 or something, I think, gathered here in the shed electronically. And they were a beautiful bunch of people actually, and fitting somewhere in the Enneagram, but each and every one of them unique in their loveliness. Also today, I got to preach in both Southampton and Streatham, our home church in South London. Both churches this morning. I gave a talk about Epiphany at St. Leonard's, which if you want to hear it, I'll post a link on Facebook just in case you want to do that. And also I took part in a church service in Southampton as well. So that was great. The gospel reading this morning at St. Leonard's was the story of the marriage of Cana, where Jesus famously turned water into wine on a rather large scale. And as I said, I grew up in a teetotal brethren church where I reckon folk would have been an awful lot happier if Jesus had turned a load of wine into water, or better still, Ribena, which was what we had for communion. But there was a story that I wanted to include in my sermon this morning, which I couldn't really fit in. I just didn't have the time. So I'd just like to share it with you now because I like it. It's a story from an Annie Dillard book. I like the writings of Annie Dillard. And it's a story about an encounter that she had while traveling in the Middle East. And it goes like this. In Cana lived a Palestinian merchant who gave wine to all comers. Wine for everyone! On the house, he cried into the street. He wore an open jacket and a blue shirt buttoned to the top. He brandished a silver tray full of tiny wine glasses. My friends wouldn't enter his shop. They thought it was a trick. It was a trick. Put a man through life for 60 years and he's generous to strangers. I took a glass of red wine from the silver tray and drank it down. In my ordinary life, I don't drink wine. Fine. This man was supposed to be selling souvenirs to tourists, which he was not doing either. We ignored his merchandise. Leaning in his open doorway, we talked, we traded cigarettes and smoked. Across the steep street, we saw the church at Cana, built where Luke's gospel says Christ turned water into wine for a wedding. Like 130,000 other Palestinians in the Galilee, this shopkeeper was a Christian. His two brothers were priests, as it happened. His two sisters were nuns. His bit was giving away wine. And don't you love that? Isn't that great? The others were priests and nuns. His bit, his ministry, was giving away wine. I think I know who had conveyed most of God's love to Annie Dillard and her friends. Anyone for a glass? So look, we're going to light a candle and take a moment of quiet before we go on any further. And I'd like to invite you just to take a moment and think what your bit is. His bit was giving away glasses of wine. I wonder what yours might be, what mine is. It was a gesture of kindness and generosity. Doesn't have to be wine, but what little kindness can we offer someone this week? Take a moment to think about that. It may be an email to someone you haven't spoken to lately. I don't know. Let's think about that. as we light a candle. And let's say together our shared serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to live fully and generously through circumstances I cannot control. Hope to keep on imagining better times for myself and the world. And courage to change what I can instead of simply leaving it to others. Amen. So last week I was talking a bit about prayer, wasn't I? Especially in connection with the whole idea of divine intervention and all that kind of stuff. I confess that I'm much more comfortable with the idea of divine interaction rather than divine intervention, not least because the language of intervention, it to me anyway, it suggests an unacceptable kind of dualism. You know, a God who is completely separate from the world and occasionally pops in and out, which is not at all how I can understand God. Some of you were clearly intrigued by this idea of divine interaction and asked if I would say more about that, which I will, but not today. Because first, I'd like to talk about prayer from a wider perspective than just what we call intercessory or petitionary prayer, the sort of prayer where it's hoped that or believed that God in some way will answer or intervene as a result to change something in the world. So I'll begin by telling you a bit about my story with prayer. As I said before, I first learned prayer from sitting on the stairs as a little boy when I was supposed to be in bed, listening to my parents close each day in prayer. Actually, it was my dad who prayed. I mean, they were part of the Brethren Church in which women never opened their mouths. They sat there with their heads covered. It was men who prayed. So my poor old mum, who later after my dad died, I heard pray a great deal, but it was just my dad I heard then. But it was really very wonderful. And why did I like it so much? I'm not really sure, to be honest, but I think it kind of gave me this warm sense of God being part of us. God concerned about us, almost like a family friend, if you like. There were requests made to God in their prayers, but not with any expectation that I could discern anyway of God miraculously intervening as a result. I think it was really a form of unburdening, actually, at the end of the day, which I think is a practice that I still like a great deal and try to do. I think there's something great at the end of the day of just, letting go of the things that we've done or the things that we haven't done. Anyway, later in my mid-teens, I became involved with the early charismatic house church movement, which had a much more dramatic approach to prayer, loud hallelujahs, arm waving, and prayers which, almost demanded God to intervene with things like healing sick people or performing some kind of miracles. The problem was that the so-called interventions, the answers to prayer that were seen at the time, were pretty patchy, and not all that convincing, if I'm honest. And once my critical brain began to kick in, I became disillusioned with the whole thing. It just didn't ring true to me. In contrast, most of the people around me at the time seemed pretty happy, really, to suspend their critical powers, which ended up leaving me as something of the odd one out. I remember one time someone disturbed by my vocal doubts and questions and saying to me, "Your problem, Dave," I mean, I didn't know I had a problem actually, but "your problem, Dave, is you're in the mind." To which I said, with only the slightest tad of sarcasm, honestly, Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to be out of my mind. But anyway, I didn't stop praying. I just learned over the years to pray differently, to pray in different ways. And as my theology changed and evolved, so did my understanding of prayer. And little by little, I began to explore completely different forms of prayer, many of which were far less dependent on words. And incidentally, I think it's important to recognize that the kind of prayer that we are drawn to or that we're comfortable with, in part at least, depends on our personality. So for some people, words are absolutely central, very important up front there. For other people, not so much. St. Francis, of course, famously said, or at least he's reported as saying, preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. Love that. I see that I think prayer is a bit like that, really, not chiefly about words. And so to me now, prayerfulness is really much more a form of consciousness, an awareness or sense of God, the divine, anywhere and everywhere. Now, you'll note that I said just then, prayerfulness is a form of consciousness, not prayer as such, because sometimes I think there's a big difference between the two things. Saying prayers can be nothing more than just that, speaking words. Being prayerful, I see as much more of a way of life, a way of being in the world. When St. Paul says pray without ceasing, I don't think he means constantly mutter religious words under your breath. I think he's describing a prayerful or mindful state of consciousness characterized as much as anything by gratitude. Martin Luther King described gratitude as the basic Christian attitude or posture. In other words, whoever walks in the world with a sense of gratitude is actually practicing the core value of Christianity, is kind of like a living, walking prayer, if you will. The 13th century mystic and theologian Meister Eckhart said that if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, that will be enough. I mean, that said, it isn't necessary, I think, to actually say the words thank you in order to be thankful or prayerful. Gratitude is first and foremost an attitude, a state of mind. I don't know if you've been watching the Winter Nature Watch on the telly on the BBC lately. I love it. It's been fantastic. Such beautiful photography. And when I listened to Chris Packham talking there, and exuding utter joy about nature, about all these birds and creatures that he's seeing there, I completely love the way he does that. And when he leads us in a kind of mindfulness moment or three, which is now part of the Nature Watch series, what I sense from Chris Packham is this deep inner gratitude. And to me, it doesn't matter a toss whether or not he believes in God. I don't think he does. But to me, that program and the way that he is in it is actually quite deeply prayerful in the true sense of the term. My missus, Pat, has never been into words the way that I am. I may have told you that at one point when I was going through a really big kind of rethink of my theology, she said to me one day, when you've decided what we believe, Dave, just let me know. Now, trust me, that did not mean that she has no opinions on things, that she hasn't got a mind of her own. Blinking heck, oh no. It's just that her faith is much more grounded in action and practice than in words and doctrines in the way that mine is. I mean, goodness knows, I have tried on occasions to get her to say the words that I wanted to hear. For years, me saying I love you to her was often really a fishing expedition to get her to respond in kind. Predictably, it failed miserably. Of course it did. But then I realized eventually that we actually spoke different love languages. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole thing of the 5 different languages of love. You can find plenty about it on the internet, and it's a very helpful and informative model. I mostly express my love with words. I'm a wordy person. Pat, on the other hand, is much more inclined to express love by making sacrifices for me, or by giving me quality time, which is often spent with hardly any words at all. And I think prayer is similar to this. Prayerfulness may, for example, be powerfully expressed through a walk in the woods, listening to the birds, smelling the foliage, sensing the timeless presence of some of our oldest living relatives, the trees. I sometimes think, if we could only see it, the whole of nature is in a state of prayerfulness. And, we're walking through the trees, or standing on a hill looking out at the sea, or gazing at the starry sky at night, that doing all of that is really just us being present to this massive cosmic prayer meeting. There's a thought. Now, as my Protestant addiction to words began to relax over the years, partly under the tutelage of my beloved, I started to discover prayer in things like crossing myself to acknowledge mystery, or by contemplating icons. I'm even happy actually sometimes kissing icons. I know, but I am. Not because I'm worshipping an image or an object, but because icons, actually like the entire material universe, can become for us a window on the loving presence within and beyond the icon, within the universe, beyond the universe. And a kiss is really just a gesture of connection with that. I mean, that said, I'm probably even happier kissing the wet nose of a dog or a baby's soft head with its blinking, wonderful, unique smell, or caressing an autumn leaf fallen to the ground but still radiating beauty. All as a way of acknowledging mystery in everything, because each of these things and many more things can become iconic to us in the truest sense of that term. Lighting a candle, as we did earlier, may be a prayer, or sitting gazing at its flame, sensing the fragility of life, or glimpsing through that flame the tiny kindling of hope that something wonderful will happen in the world. We don't know how or when. Listening to music, I like that. Listening to music, or making it, may also be prayerful. Dancing with a beloved in the kitchen when no one's there. Contemplating a painting, or tilling a tiny patch of ground in the garden, or a pot to plant a seed or a small plant. Each of these things and many, many more in its own way can become a breath of prayerfulness sent out into the world. I once joined a group led by a Sufi master who was at our church, who taught us to dance as prayer. It wasn't something that came easy to me. I think dancing in that kind of way, liturgical or kind of spiritual dance, is a little bit spooky to me, but I went with the flow and I did it. And it was good. And at the end of the evening, as a blessing, we all stood round in a circle, but facing outwards, not inwards. And we were invited by our leader to push our hands out to bless the world by pushing out love. Now, that might sound a little bit new age to you, but actually it was a very precious experience. The sense that we have this connectedness and this interaction with the world at a spiritual level, as well as just the purely physical. Silence. Now, silence is another amazing, fertile space for prayerfulness to flourish, which, of course, the Quakers have known for a long time and have taught us that. Maybe moods, are a form of prayer, without you saying anything or thinking anything at all. Moods, I think, moods of yearning, moods of anger sometimes, or of ecstasy, of disappointment, of passion, of sadness, of inspiration, moods of injustice, or calm moods, moods of compassion or of excitement or melancholy or hopefulness or loneliness, moods of outrage or satisfaction or self-pity. Maybe all of those sort of things in their own way are also forms of prayer. And here's the wonderful thing, that neuroscience now demonstrates that prayerfulness and meditation may result in a very happy brain. It changes the brain for the better. For example, with the help of MRI scans, it's now clear that prayer and mindfulness and meditation nurture the parts of the brain that contribute to well-being, and on the other hand deprives the stress and anxiety related parts of the brain of their food, of their sustenance. So there's a great book on it by Andrew Newberg, which is on my shelf over there, called How God Changes Your Brain. And he's a neuroscientist who specializes in MRI brain scanning. And, he's done scans on all kinds of people, from Buddhists to nuns to all kinds of people engaging in meditation, and, shown through scanning how it affects the brain in just the way that I've taught about nurturing the well-being part of the brain and squeezing back the kind of anxiety sides of the brain. I'll finish with a fabulous poem about prayer, of course, by Mary Oliver, who, as much as anyone I've encountered, practiced a prayerful consciousness with regard to nature. And I've put the words up here on the screen. I don't know where prayers go or what they do. Do cats pray while they sleep, half asleep in the sun? Does the opossum pray as it crosses the street? The sunflowers, the old black oak growing older every year. I know I can walk through the world, along the shore or under the trees, with my mind filled with things of little importance, in full self-attendance, a condition I can't really call being alive. Is a prayer a gift or a petition, or does it matter? The sunflowers blaze. Maybe that's their way. Maybe the cats are sound asleep. Maybe not. While I was thinking of this, I happened to be standing just outside my door with my notebook open, which is the way I begin every morning. Then a wren in the privet began to sing. He was positively drenched in enthusiasm. I don't know why, and yet why not? I wouldn't persuade you from whatever you believe or whatever you don't. That's your business. But I thought of the wren singing. What could this be if it isn't a prayer? So I just listened, my pen in the air. Fabulous. So I'm going to say a prayer now. We give thanks to you, O God, for your love for the world. You look upon us and still recognize the goodness within. You conceive in us 1,000 possibilities and carry us on into the timeless struggle in bringing to birth the reign of love in the world. We thank you for our brother Jesus, who gave hope to ordinary people like us, crashing through the boundaries that separate us from life and from each other. With those who've gone before us and those who will come after us, with people of every time, place, culture and creed, we unite with all creation in the eternal hymn, saying, please join me, Holy, loving God, mystery of the universe, who cannot ever truly be named, heaven and earth are crammed with your wonder. Save us, we pray, from small minds and mean spirits, and fill us instead with passion for kindness and justice. Amen. Okay, now we've come to that moment, haven't we? If you've got a drink, it's time for the Holy Sacrament in the Holy Shed. So pour yourself a little drink, or grab yourself a cuppa, or whatever it is that you've got to hand, and join me in a sacramental toast. Dear lovely friends, wherever you are, let's together toast the glorious gift of life in all its beauty and diversity, even in a world living under the shadow of the coronavirus. Life is still beautiful. Life is still diverse. and let us toast the future, a future of love and justice and health for ourselves. And let's toast this magnificent planet that is our mother, our home. Please raise your glass with me and say, to life, l'chaim. Fantastic. Well, we're coming toward an end, guys, and if you're supportive of what we're doing here in the shed and you like it, this is where we kind of pass the hats around. So if you want to contribute to that, you don't have to, but you can support me through the coffee site. The link is at the top of all the posts on the Holy Shed site, and you just go there and buy us a coffee or two or whatever, completely up to you. Thank you so much, every single one of you who does this all the time for us. Thank you very much. So we've come to an end, and I'm completely knackered, to be honest. I've had a really busy weekend, and I think I've done well that I didn't actually fall asleep in the middle of this. So, that's an achievement. I hope that something useful has come across to you. I think, I was saying to the people in the Enneagram workshop earlier, I think more and more I'm convinced there are sort of two kinds of people in the world, really. There are people who realize that life's a journey that we have to go on inside, not just out. People who open themselves to the prospect of change and evolution within themselves. Who, in other words, are willing to do some inner work on themselves, to contemplate who they are and who they want to be. And there are other people who frankly don't give a toss, for whom life is just all about me, and I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And one of them seems to me to be a pathway of life, abundant life that Jesus spoke of, and the other way is the pathway ultimately of death. So I'm glad to be part of a community of people here in the shed who I think are choosing the pathway of life and hope and internal evolution. So we'll say a blessing together, I think. Do you know what? I don't think I've got it here. So I'm just going to pray it anyway. The blessing of God, the eternal goodwill of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God be among us and between us now and always. And the blessing of God, creator, liberator and sustainer, be with you and remain with you always. Amen. So look, I'll see you next week. I hope I might see you during the week, actually, if you're interested. I'm certainly going to do a shedlet in the middle of the week this week. I'm a little bit sort of calmer and able to do that now. But otherwise, I'll see you next week. And look after yourselves out there. Go well. Be kind to yourselves. Very important. Be kind to others. Stay human. And I'll see you soon. Bye.